So having listened to all previous speakers and having gone through literature, the one word or other which has taken space in my mind is that there are immense possibilities in translation. And since the idea was haunting, I was trying to relate it to what? So, the idea which came to my mind was CCD. A lot can happen over coffee. But there is one stipulation. If you have a developed taste for coffee, a lot can happen. But if you do not, then you might feel frustrated, upset. And that's applicable to translation also. If you do not have taste, you do not have that flash, if you don't have that understanding, then you might feel flustered. Otherwise, there are ways to enjoy, there are ways to take up as your career, to send messages, and to get a space. But yes, what stipulation is that you should have that developed taste, you should have that taste, you should have that qualification. So before I take up the main issue, and also when I joined last week, the day seminar was to be inaugurated, I composed some couplets, and that was also applicable to this immense possibilities in translation. I do not know how many of you understand Hindustani or Hindi, but those who they can appreciate. ख्वाब ये आंखों में पलते देखूं, ख्वाब ये आंखों में पलते देखूं, रात भर नींद में चलते देखूं, आसमानी दिन चांदनी रातें सुरमई आंखों में ढलते देखूं, बहार बनके कभी आओ गोश, बहार बनके कभी आओ गोश, गुंचे हर शाख पे खुलते देखूं. So this translation is that it gives it that space, it's that space, that place, that opportunity, that genre where immense varieties are there, branches are there where you can enjoy as far as career is concerned. Then next thing about translation concept which came to my mind, which I've read long back. I remember it was in somewhere 90s. There was one professor, Sompi Ranchan, in Shimla University, HP Shimla. So I used Indian literary theories as translation theory. I do not know whether people have done it, but this is what he said those days. You should work on it, and this is something a new area. So that those concepts also came to my mind, where we have anukriti, imitation, arthkriya, bhashya, bhashantar, paribhasha, and Indian literary theories. Anukriti, anukaran, imitation, but this is not imitation which we have in Plato and in Aristotle. To some extent that is there, but it's different from that. Natya Shastra, I think many of you attended those classes when I taught you Natya Shastra, where in Artkriya also, both of them, then we will talk about 4 kinds of languages. Your Angik, Vachik, Ahari and Satvik. Then Bhashya, interpretation, Vedic text. Again, you are now, Indian philosophy, I taught you about how things were interpreted. There was 2-3 lectures for interpretation. And still, what you are now reading in Vedangas, we have also that tradition therein, when we were talking about your Pratishakhas and all. And Parni grammar, interpretation of there, Bhashantar, Bhashya. And Bhashantar running into different language. What in today's context, localization. Pratibha, Paribhasha. Again, Panini, so need not to define. It's there defined what Paribhasha is and what kinds of Paribhashas there in Parni grammar. And Indian literary theories. Even I have taught you Indian literary theories, where there is aesthetic content, that figures, use of figures, metaphors, phrasal organization, reading. Then we have meaning, kinds of meaning. The discussion we started with the Mimamsa and all till your Anandavardhan. And then we have Vakrokti, which deals at 6 levels. Phonetic level, lexical level, grammatical level, syntactical level, episodical level, and composition level. So now you can correlate. While I am listening to the experts, they were talking about the levels of translation, which we must know the meaning, we should know the lexical items, phonetic items, and all, grammar and all. And then last is your Auchitya, which talks about propriety. That is a common denominator in translation also. So these all concepts came to my mind. So we can also develop through Indian concepts, Indian theories or of translation. And there, this has been explained. There is one book written in 10th century, Kavya Mimamsa, by Rajgir. In Kavya Mimamsa, Guru Brihaspati is teaching his disciples, and the disciple asks, what is this Kavya Purush? Kavya Purush, literature or composition. So he talks about Shabd and Arth, which Bhama also tells Shabdartho Saito Kavyam. So Kavyam, composition is there. So it's togetherness on word and meaning. That is a condition there in your translation also. So sense of togetherness is there. Then he talks about different kinds of languages. He talks about Sanskrit, he talks about Prakrit, talks about Apbhransh, talks about Paishachi, then mixed languages also. They are also part of translation. But does not talk about soul. Rajgir does not talk about what is the soul of Kavya Purush. It doesn't. Because if you see Indian literary theories, they say, when Bharat says, it's Ras. Ras is the soul. Bhama says, this is Alankar. Then third is your Vaman. He says, it's phrasal organization. Then your Anandavardhan, he says, it's Dhwani, suggested meaning. कि तूने एक बात कही लाख फसाने निकले. कि when you say one thing, you tell one thing, and immense meanings are there. So it all depends upon the listener. And then Vakrokti, he says, is striking, obliqueness, which we have here in the Russian formalism. Jacobson, Swarovski, art of technique talking about. So oblique use of language. And then again, propriety, they say, no, Orchid is the soul. So that's why it's so fluid. So Rajgir doesn't talk about soul. So what is soul? It's approach. So these, and then one important thing, that is your as far as theory is concerned, even to understand theory, to understand literature, to interpret literature, it's not necessary. But yes, one thing is there. You read a text or composition, you enjoy it. You can enjoy even without theory. But with the theory, you have points, you have places to enjoy. You have mapping. When you visit Rajgir, you can enjoy the way you like. But if somebody tells you that that's a temple, you should go to the temple, you go to that place, that saves your time and you become an expert. So you are accounted for the joy. You read a poem, watch a movie. When I ask you, why did you appreciate? Why did you enjoy? So as a layman, I enjoy, but I won't be able to. Maybe some accounts, a very in a very casual way, ordinary way. Yeah, these are the things which I like. But as a trained reader, as a trained person, you can say, oh yes, what a dialogue was there, what the colors used, scenes used, the background used, the dialogues, the songs and all. Because you are an expert, you know. So this is how theory also works. In translation also, translation theory doesn't make you a translator. With the help of Basharte, you have that instantaneous flash. You have that pratibha. You have that taste, sehirde. You can elevate to the level of the writer. Then you can enjoy it. But understanding is the base. Instantaneous flash is there. You understand things, you can translate it. This is one example. There is one song. It was in 50s. Song was written by Shailendra. हैं सबसे मधुर वो गीत जिन्हें हम दर्द के सुर में गाते हैं सबसे मधुर वो गीत जिन्हें हम दर्द के सुर में गाते हैं. इसका ट्रांसलेशन आप इसे देखो, आप इस पोएम अब आपको याद आएगी तो आप लगेगा कि हाउ करेक्ट इट दैट आवर स्वीटेस्ट सॉन्ग्स आर दोज दैट टेल ऑफ अ सैडेस्ट थॉट. मुझे लगता है कोई थ्योरी शायद नहीं शैली ने पढ़ी होगी ट्रांसलेशन की. सो because that flash, that instantaneous flash, that pratibha, that genius, that understanding, that heart, so that is your personality. मैं कभी कभी जब लिखता हूं, I write poetry, तो जो अच्छी my daughter is काफी मुझसे ज्यादा समझदार है, पर वो मुझसे कभी पूछती ये पापा इसका जरा टेल मी द मीनिंग ऑफ दिस कपलेट. मैंने कहा अब नहीं आएगा तेरे समझ में ये कि ये शेर का मतलब, शायरी का मतलब, पोइट्री का मतलब समझाया नहीं जा सकता. ये महसूस कर सकते हो आप, समझ सकते हो, कोई एक्सप्लेन नहीं कर सकता इसको. तो हम बहुत अच्छे इंटेलेक्चुअल हो सकते हैं, बहुत स्कॉलर हो सकते हैं, बट दैट डजंट मीन यू बिकम ए गुड ट्रांसलेटर, यू बिकम ए गुड राइटर, गुड क्रिएटर. यस, बट थ्रू प्रैक्टिस वी कैन डू इट. So translation as for creative writing, we'll talking in the last semester, you need practice. Never satisfied. Similar happens with translation also. You need practice. If you practice, you can refine yourself. But there is no as such one-to-one theory. You translate and the message is. So the condition is that message, aesthetic, your reception of aesthetic meaning, or the bond, the common bond, the cementing bond. They need to establish cementing bond between the reader and the writer, between the reader and the translator. So for that you have to elevate yourself, and then again for that there is no theory at all. You are sensitive, you are insensitive, you are dull, you are pointed, you are meditative. These are all your states of mind, and they automatically you switch over them. अब मुझे बात कर रहे हैं आप बड़े एक डिफरेंट मूड में हैं. आप अपने स्टूडेंट से बात कर रहे हैं, यू आर इन डिफरेंट मूड. सुशांत जी आ गए, आप डिफरेंट मूड में आ गए कि अब शुरू होने वाली है क्लास. कॉफी में, सो दिस इज हाउ इन अ मिनट यू चेंज. So that changing pattern is there. So for that, what you do, that you have to level to the level of the writer, the translator, in order to understand things. And it's just like two वीणाs. ये एक एग्जाम्पल भी मुझे बहुत पुरानी याद आई कि उसमें एक ट्रांसलेशन में कि ट्रांसलेटर को और राइटर को हाउ यू कैन कंपेयर. सो इट्स लाइक टू वीणाs put into the same room. When you strike the chords of one, another veena resonates. That's there. So translator resonates, the writer resonates. So it's a resonance. But for resonance, so no theory, these some scattered ideas came to my mind, so I thought I should share with you. And coming here, and all these concepts you would find in Indian literary theories, in Indian concept, which you can use as translation. Next, related to translation, two words are very important: cautious canonization and appropriate selection. Purpose could be many, but you can't be general. Like, because our focus is on Mughal period, particularly on Darashikoh, and colonial periods. Both ruled the country, both empire ruled the country. So the common denominator was cautious canonization, official translation as an official genre, which was established right from Akbar. It was Akbar who established a house of translation, and he spent huge money. And then selective appropriation, which text should be translated, which we call, so in the other way, if I say there was a politics of translation, the translation has a politics also, it's impregnated with, even today. So when you are translating, you are not translating just the translator, rather, and it's not a loss of your personality, it's an extension of your personality. The moment when the river falls into an ocean, for some, it's a loss of identity, loss of existence, but for others, it could be extension. A boom, a drop becomes an ocean. Or yes, a river becomes nothing after entering into ocean. So, both say to align, the purpose was to align with the Islamic framework. The things were translated. Texts were chosen, selected. Later I'll come to them. And what was the courtly discourse? So function was to align to the Islamic discourse or your courtly discourse, Persian discourse. Then inter-religious understanding. And then they had so intellectual traditions, and in broader sense, Indo-Persianate culture. So there was a coming together, a sense of together, a mingling of two cultures, two religions, two societies. When I say word society and culture, so I say with a particular emphasis. Society does not mean the way we have in Indian context. Society means a group of people, those who are conscious of their duty. Only that is society. If you are not conscious of your duty, your dharma, then it's not a society, it's just gathering of people. Bheer hai, crowd hai. But in Indian context, only society is a condition, it's a stipulation. A society has consciousness for duty. And when the consciousness of duty is implemented into action, then it becomes culture. So this is how that is called a tradition, parampara. And that is there. The moment anybody comes to India or remains in India, or any system of philosophy, any system of society, they all have tradition, which yesterday, day before yesterday, or yesterday, sir will just, that lecture was on Buddhist translation. So parampara is there. That is spiritual masters, through spiritual masters. So the spiritual masters are the cementing bonds. They continue the tradition, that consciousness. They do nothing. The only thing is they continue to sensitize us for the duty, consciousness of duty and its implementation. Purpose of theory is also not to make you a theorist, but to sensitize you. And similar, so in different ways, purpose of these lectures, purpose of these theories are all not to tell you, not to make you translators, but to sensitize you to this genre and how it had happened. So thank you very much. Let me say thanks to Professor Sushant, because he made me learn so many things which I didn't know earlier, or rather have some ideas, but he made me to concretize those things. So this is all, credit goes to him. And I enjoyed it. Even I realize it, because I have been working on theories for last around 30 years, constantly about theories, Indian theories. But after coming to Nalanda, I could realize what I was doing that was worthwhile, and how I could even change myself, sensitize further. So that's a part of that project. So here, this was there. So coming together, sense of the society and culture of Mughal, translating into Persian, the Sanskrit text that was bringing together society and culture. Yes, somewhere there, it was there, but not very prominent, putting to let us feel that we are somewhere, to some extent, we are inferior to them. But that is there in colonial times. They translate it, they learn Sanskrit, they translate through Persian into English, all Indian text, but there was to promote superiority of the Western culture, superiority of the Western society and culture, to ensure control over the colonized. So that is there, which we would find in the reactions of translations done thereafter. So this is a basic difference between the translation done during Persian Empire and those of colonial times. It's just an idea of your Mughal rule. How this entire Babur, Humayun, Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb, it was a decline with, and last we have Bahadur Shah Zafar. And decisive battle was the Plassey, fought in 1757, Bengal. So then there we have how the French imperialistic ambitions in India, they were decimated, they were removed. How East India came, how thereafter East India Company also had to stop their agenda, which became official for the government, British government, by the parliamentary acts. It's just an idea of both the empires, nothing so important. But yes, in there, the monopoly of this East India Company, that was ended, and the trade with India was thrown open to British Empire. So let's now come to so it's not much important to your translation, just information about the empire, who the emperors, particularly those who were liberal to this translation genre. pits it there. Which it? So then, it doesn't have any role in translation. Then we have translation during the rule of Akbar, Jahangir or Shah Jahan. There were three important, but most of the translations were done during Akbar's period, and he established a house of translation. That's your Maktab Khana, and huge amount of money is spent on translation. It was for the first time, the important thing in Akbar's time was, it was for the first time that full Mahabharata was translated. And then another important thing was Ramayana. Ramayana in poetic form during the period of Shah Jahan. The other translation was there, but there were two very important translations which were appreciated. Beside them, we have Ramayana, Atharvaveda, Panchatantra. Then we have Bhagavad Gita, Nal Damayanti story, Mahabharata. Many of you might be knowing it was in the Arth Kriya, in the form of Arth Kriya. It had been recited so many times. Then we have Nal Damayanti. Then we have Leelavati. Leelavati is important. You might have not heard it. Leelavati is a text of maths, Indian maths. And nowadays, if you go, if any university, most maybe in the news and all, you would learn this word, Leelavati. So Leelavati looks very odd, or some lady's name. It's the name of a text on mathematics, Indian mathematics. And Yoga Vasisht is about Lord Ram. So if you really want to know who Ram was, then you must read this Yoga Vasisht. Ram is not only in Ramcharitamanas or in Ramayana, but real Ram you would find in Yoga Vasisht. And people say that if somebody reads Yoga Vasisht, his soul is purified. And it is about and Darashikoh also had this experience. In his experience, in his dream, he saw Ram and sage Vasisht, who asked him to translate Yoga Vasisht into Persian. This is how far, again, things are there to question, but we find this kind of statements there, here and there. So these were the texts during Akbar. They were translated. And then Darashikoh. Darashikoh again took it up as an official. And Sushantji added, but I didn't read the word, but he added, and I realized that if it had been used by some other people, that's very nice. If it hadn't been used, it's very appropriate that he has added that Darashikoh's school. Because school has its own features. And school does not have any political affiliation, sampradaya. Like if you read in Indian, there's again Indian tradition. So we have a Ras Sampradaya, we have a Alankar Sampradaya, we have a Riti Sampradaya, and then so all Alankar or Sampradaya. Vakrokti doesn't have a Sampradaya, which is not being followed when other texts are not written on some instruction without political affiliation. So there was no political affiliation. There was no coding. There are no cautious canonization for the benefit of empire. But it was for absolutely bringing two faith together, intellectual tradition together. एक गजल का मुझे एक और शेर याद आ गया उनकी बात पे, जो आई वुड लाइक टू डिवोट इट टू दराशिकोह, कि खुदा का जिक्र कर रहे हैं, खुदा का जिक्र करें या तुम्हारी बात करें, खुदा का जिक्र करें या तुम्हारी बात करें, हमें तो इश्क से मतलब किसी की बात करें। फरिश्ते तुम भी नहीं, फरिश्ते हम भी नहीं, फरिश्ते तुम भी नहीं, फरिश्ते हम भी नहीं, हम आदमी हैं तो फिर आदमी की बात करें। सो ही वाज टॉकिंग अबाउट ह्यूमन कंसर्न, ह्यूमन अफेयर्स थ्रू इंटरफेथ, थ्रू इंटेलेक्चुअल एक्रोबैटिक्स and through spiritual contours. So these three things he was having in his mind, and it was not all of a sudden. He did not have. We do not have much, score about his life, about his life dealing with. But yes, from here and there, what we have that. He was just like an ordinary Muslim. When he was talking to this Mullah Shah Badakhshir, it was his guru. So once he was talking to him, Vedas, talking to Upanishads, so Darashikoh bole ki, you are a Muslim, you observe namaz daily, and you are talking about other religions. How is possible? कैसी आप बातें कर रहे हैं? ये तो उल्टी बासी है. You're talking something opposite. Then he said, no. That's the reality. There's one, Qadri tradition of Sufis. So in Qadri traditions, we do not draw line of demarcations. All religious lines are free because all we are talking about one. So therefore, you should not talk about the difference. You should not have that negation. Rather, you should remove the perception of difference in your eyes. Perception of difference. There was one more important that was translated by them. It was Mahabhagavad Puran. There is an anecdote, episode in Mahabhagavad Puran. When Vyas compiled compiled all Vedas, Upanishad, epics and all, sitting once in the evening at his home, disturbed, full of anxieties as every intellectual generally has, and even we people also, after accomplishing one object, one purpose, one thing, we think what to next. So he's worried what to next, and in the meanwhile, his son Shuk also comes. Shuk says, I have decided to go to the forest to take penance. I have fed up this world. Vyaji said, I am already perturbed about my anxieties, intellectual anxieties, and you are also adding to them that you are leaving, you are going to take penance, you are leaving this world, leaving this, going to forest. I was expecting from you that you would look after me when I am old. But he was adamant. He said, no, I have decided I'll go. He put off his clothes and goes to the forest. And Vyasji, surreptitiously following his son. He is all naked going. After some time, then he was passing by a lake where young girls were taking bath. And the girls kept taking bath. Didn't bother when he passed by them. But when Vyasji approached, reached near this lake, all of them came out saying, oh Vyasji, come and put on your clothes. Vyasji said, you are just like my daughters. My young son who was all naked went by. You didn't bother, and when I'm an old man just like your father, you say you put on your clothes, Vyasji coming. Then they say, so through those girls, Vyasji give a message. They say, Vyasji, in the eyes of your son, there is no perception in difference. But there is, in your perception, there is a difference. That's why we say, you know, they are girls and boys, but that difference is gone in the eyes of your son. So he didn't bother. So it's there. So that perception, that difference in perception that was not there in Darashikoh. That was a basic difference between Darashikoh and Akbar also. So he was, all concern was human concern. And that human concern is visible, discernible in his writings, in his translations. So he had encounters with three persons, three spiritual masters, under whose influence he became an enlightened person. And these were the Mullah Shah Badakshi, his teacher, and it was Badakshi who got him in touch with your Qadri Sufi Sant Mia Mir. Mia Mir was the person who was invited. He was so respected that he was invited to Golden Temple when Golden Temple was decided to be built. And then Baba Lal Bairagi, again an important name. So all the two persons he came into contact with through Mullah Shah Badakshi. And then Pandit Raj Jagannath. Another important person who was known to Darashikoh, known to Shah Jahan, known to Jahangir also. It was given the honor of Pandit. There are two versions. Some say it was Jahangir, some say it was Shah Jahan, but people say it was Shah Jahan. Most of the people say it was Shah Jahan, but later on, he was so friendly. He was a part of the family. This daughter of Shah Jahan, Lavangi, some say got married, then he was converted, Pandit Jagannath, but some others say no, it was not. It was not that kind of a sense of togetherness. Rather, some say that Pandit Jagannath was the spiritual teacher of Lavangi. But however, this Darashikoh was friendly. So he learned so many things from this Jahangir, or this Pandit Jagannath. And this is how, so these are certain books, if you see, so we were writing all biographies, they are writing of spiritual paths, and then Compass Truth, Risal, and Darashikoh, the collection of poems, spiritual discussion about Darashikoh and Babalal, then Upanishad, then 50 pages document by Dara in which analytically compare both Islam and Hinduism. This was the beginning, where he made up his mind to, or rather it was also, yes, it was also decided that it was the instruction of the two. First it was that he had a dream, in dream he had, sage Vachist and all, this is how he came towards your Indian text, but it was Mullah Shah Badakshi also, that he instructed him to translate Upanishads, particularly he talked about Upanishad, that you should translate Upanishad, then you would see a new world will open for you and to all others. So this is how, on the advice of Mullah Shah Badakshi, he started translating those things. Rather, he turned to translation from writing. These are the translation. There's a great secret. 50 Upanishad, the Sire Akbar, Yog Vashist, then Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Tulsidas, Ramcharitmanas. Then we have some Sagar Sangam, then Krishnamurti's famous play, Prabodh Chandrodaya. And in all of them, you would find it was interfaith understanding, mystical connections, and intellectual exchange. So these three things were there in his translations. Thereafter, the contribution, this is what A.L. Basham that includes, that tells us, mentions that so major contribution of Darashikoh, it's through Darashikoh, it's through Persian. The Indian text, they could be introduced to the Western people, to the Western writers, where the real renaissance started And here you say it was, A.L. Basham said that it was like the discovery of classical literature that had influenced learning some centuries before, but it was a greater shock than the Renaissance, because the new text came from a land which had until that time been considered primitive and pagan. In keeping with the finest syncretic tradition, the first person who tried to build this bridge between two entirely different, even hostile tradition was a Mughal prince. That was your Darashikoh. So it was Darashikoh. So if you see all his translation, even his writings, all writings have certain features which are followed. Even you won't find any kind of deviation in approach in any translation. So far we didn't have any information where there was a deviation from the parameter decided by Darashikoh. And the parameters were that faith, that spiritual contours, connections, and your then your social sense of togetherness. So these are things which is important. So because the translations are not available that way, and even they're available, there are some references to some libraries, one or two are, but they are Persian. So this again, and reading them in translation again, doesn't give me any sense. But the important thing was which continued the tradition, that legacy, that Indian tradition, culture. That was the major contribution of Darashikoh, which introduced these through text, India, its consciousness, its society, its culture, its tradition to the West. Then, and it's through them, then Germans also. So the discovery of Indian consciousness in Western mind, in Western people, or in Western tradition, it was all through. So two things were there. If you see, you would there was nothing, even an iota of doubt, suspicion in the translation of Darashikoh. There's something very important. Nobody rejected, nobody pointed out any kind of deviation, any kind of motive imputed there, which we would find later on in colonial times. So here, then we have translation of Sanskrit text into English, then translation of Sanskrit text into German, then again into world languages, then assessment. Then there was a turn when these translation was assessed. But these, you won't find the translation done by Darashikoh or commissioned by him. They were not questioned, not translated further, but as soon as they were translated by Westerns, assessment started. They were British or Germans. Though initially Germans were venerated, but British translations were never accepted. They had every time sense of doubt in them. So because of them, there was assertion of identity, resistance, sense of liberty, and then came Hindi Renaissance, then translation from Sanskrit into Indian languages, prose. That was the beginning of de-Sanskritization and de-Persianization also. It was a start of localization of prose. Now, the purpose was to consolidate the gains of the empire. How to consolidate the gains? That was the purpose, and the first initiative was by Governor General Warren Hastings. And the first text was translated, it was Vivadaranav Setu. Vivad. dispute. So it's a bridge to cross the ocean of disputes. So it was a compilation of Hindu laws. Hindu laws, that was first. Again, the motive was to gain the empire, to consolidate the empire gains, and then Bhagavad Gita and Hitopdesh by Charles Wilkins. So Bhagavad Gita, generally we take up it in a gorgeous way, that it was translated by Wilkins and given to the world, and then thereafter it was translated in number of languages, several languages. But here we have, and that even this George, for College of Fort St. George at Madras, it was also established, founded, and again with the same game. But here there wasn't some unholy plan. There was an intention. That intention is exposed in the translation of Gita. And there is a reference in the book. There was in 80, I was a student of MA. There was a seminar on Gita. It was later on published. And there's a book on influence of Bhagavad Gita and the world text, in the world, like this is the, exactly I'm forgetting the name. And there, this was a reference. So Wilkins in his version, this version had introduced many European notions not in the original and entirely opposed to the Hindu life and gains. Just a reference, but there could be so many references. This is just want to substantiate that there was some unholy plan. There was some kind of intention, cautious canonization, selective appropriation in order to consolidate the gains of the empire and to let us feel that you are inferior to us. So that was working every time in their translations. The second initiative was by William Jones. So as well, the Asiatic Society of Bengal, which played an important role in India. So now they again take up the translations. And now the Kalidas translation of Shakuntala, that played a major role. And then second was your Law of Manu, the book of Manu, that was George Foster. So they were now being translated from English to German and from German to different languages or from English to different languages. So here, no doubt, proliferation was there. Translation was established, translation of Indian text was established, people were reading, drawing to this kind of accepting that knowledge system that religions are there in India. But to some extent, Macaulay was there. It was intentional. Sometimes it so happens, it might not be intentional. It's as sometimes when I am working as an Indian. So there could not be any plan in my mind, but automatically because in my being, so that is there, or it is because of the difference of culture also. So we cannot say it was a plan also later on among writers or the translators. There could be a difference of cultures also, difference of society, this social setup also, because Indian and Western, something is very clear. We have to draw a line of demarcation. Like we have a cyclic system of life. We die, we take birth. But in the West, they have a linear system of life. One day they will come up. Then the day of judgment would come up. But we have a day of judgment every moment. We have a notion of sacred at every moment. And another difference about language also. For West, language is communicative. It has a communication purpose. It has a scriptal approach that is logocentric. and it represents life, it represents objects, it represents reality. But for us, that is phonetic, that is phonocentrism. It has a cognitive system. So until or unless a language has a thought, it's not a language, it doesn't work. It only works, it's a language when it is impregnated with some kind of thought, cognitive value. And it doesn't represent reality, rather it constructs reality. कि मैंने जब कहा कि आज आपसे एक मिलने वाले आ रहे हैं, आज एक आर्मी से ब्रिगेडियर मिलने वाले आ रहे हैं, so you everybody has his or her own brigadier feature, image. अगर मैं कहूं कि चलो आज शाम को आज दावत है, एक पार्टी है, so everybody has his or her own party, कि कैसा पार्टी होनी चाहिए, कैसी पार्टी होगी वो, हम कहां जाएंगे. So everybody, so a word gives you different world. It creates, every word creates a world for you, and you have your own world. So this is how language constructs the world, constructs reality. So this is a basic difference. So maybe while we talk about the empire in British Empire, yes, the plan was there, unholy plan was there. It was to consolidate the gains of empire. But later on, maybe it's because of the difference approach to life, to language, to society, to culture, there could be some differences. Then, another important was Thomas Colebrook, the successor of William Jones. And now, it strengthened the translations, the translation activity there. And now, but again, to ensure a foothold of the empire, we cannot abolish this idea, we cannot forget this idea that was there, that was official canonization there to ensure the foothold of the British in the multilinguistic and multicultural Indian space. And now, because that Wilkins' translation of Gita was translated into several European languages. So it was a boom of translation. I have just included some languages. There are many of languages which I didn't write just because it had an important role, just to tell you, give you the feel that how Gita was translated, how it received attention at the level of the world. And that also, thereafter, it heralded the study of Upanishad, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, Shakuntala, Panchtantra, Manu Law, book in Germany, particularly. And then these all great writers they responded to. Thereafter, the important term was there, assessment started. And in this assessment, initially, the Indian writers, Indian scholars, they had apprehension, they had doubt, suspicion, right from the very beginning in English translation of Indian text. And they had veneration for your German translations, but later on, they came to the conclusion both are doing the same thing. This is what your Edward said also in his book. He concluded that they were all, in one way or the other, letting us feel that we are inferior in culture to them, or in ideology. So now, your Raja Ram Mohan Rai and R.C. Datta, two important persons were there during those days, those who translated. Now they started translating in old languages to let them feel or also showing the difference that where the English translations or German translations were wrong. How the wrong picture was being is demonstrated here before the world. What was the fact? The movement could not receive impetus because of their interest, not having much interest in their own tradition. Because somewhere or the other, that now English is working in the mind. Language is working in their mind, in the mind. And we were trying to, even some plays were there which were translated into sometimes Hindi or English or some other languages also were translated. And people were feeling, a kind of sense of glory when the wife is calling her husband my lord. So people were also imitating and feeling so happy and while they say imitating the Western, particularly the British mannerism was there. So because of that also. But however, this is started and say the R.C. Datta and Raman Rai, and of course then thereafter we have these Dinbandhu Mitra, Aurobindo, Rabindranath Tagore, where they also misnet, they also translations, and of course through their own writings also. So a new kind of assertion, identity could emerge among journal leaders also when they were writing and translating the Indian text. And then we have Hindi Renaissance came. It was resistance. Two things are there. In colonial times, British masters, there was kind of competitive egoism. But there, in Hindi Renaissance, even before that, when R.C. Datta and the people coming from Bengal, your Tagore, Aurobindo, they did not have competitive egoism. Rather, they wanted to present the reality of Indian text, the reality of Indian culture, the reality of Indian society. Because they could see by that time, there was no recognition, even till today, if you see the Western bibliography, you would not find the names of Indian in that bibliography. Even there is something, it's an irony that if you see the experts, on scholars on Mahabharata, the name will come Windy Doniger. So again, and we also, to some extent, we also try to know from them. We present ourselves as a data and West is a theory. There's a book on, India Unbound by Gurcharan Das. All Western scholars, the great contribution of Gurcharan Das was that he popularized Vicks Vaporub in India. He studied in US, came back, in Bombay Richardson Company joined, and it was he who popularized Vicks Vaporub in every house. So he wrote one book, India Unbound. India, and another book, The Difficulty of Being Good. That was based on Mahabharata. So before he started writing, he went to Windy Doniger to learn Mahabharata, to study Mahabharata, and this is recorded. It's recorded in his own book. He said, when I went to Windy Doniger says, "Better, why did you come to this place? Why did you come to this place? Better you could understand it there, living in India." Then he says, "Go no, because I've been your student. I learned so many things from you. So I would love to learn it from you." And she says, "You should learn the Sanskrit text. You should learn the language. You should read it. Through English, you cannot understand it. Because so the whole world was learning about Indian text through English. But Windy Doniger says, even Windy Doniger is not accepted in today in Indian, among Indian scholars. People do not accept her as they'll say she's a critic of India. But this is what she also says, that he asked Gurcharan Das, go read Sanskrit. He said, I don't understand. Even if you do not understand Sanskrit, you read it, it purifies soul. So I think the best thing of the irony is we accept our things where they come from the West. So all society, culture, norms and all, many things you would find because we have a different notion of the West. But if you really go there, you find that our things are, they followed our things, we are following their bad things. And there, so we have our own image just through them. So that was there, the intention of R.C. Dutt and your Rabindranath Tagore or your Aurobindo and then your Rajaram Mohan Rai. They were trying to remove, they're trying to repair the dent. Through there, so it was the, so now they have the identity of self, and the, some Hindi writers, they were resistance. They were resistance against colonial framework. And then translated from Sanskrit to Indian languages. So now, earlier the discussion was from Sanskrit to English, from Sanskrit to German, from Sanskrit to different things. Then they starting talking about learning Indian text. Then in order to, again, in order to understand ourselves, and then again a new movement came, or a new move was there from translate from Sanskrit into Indian language. That was an assertion of nativity. And here, so this was all coming in different languages, particularly in prose, but yes, we could understand ourselves, but there was, we moved away from our tradition of Sanskrit text. And then there was a de-Sanskritization. Everything was in prose, localization, and of course, nation building. The nation building phrase came into, and on the name of nation building, so many good things happen, as bad things have happened. So it's all life. We have all things together. Things go together, good and bad things. And I think that was the part of where we could not save the text of Sanskrit, we could not read rather, and particularly that was the South, the reaction, that why Sanskrit, why not Tamil, why not pure Malayalam, why not pure Tamil, and to some extent it suits to us also when we are changing, reading, translating into Gujarati, Marathi, Bengali, Hindi and all. But yes, the new name came that we became a so-called nation through these prose writings. Thank you very much.